For me, it started with gospel music. A group of African American women were singing for their children who had asthma and for neighbors who had cancer. It was a strange picture, these women standing in front of these huge smokestacks that were emitting a poisonous gas. It was deceiving because the thin line of white smoke looked very innocent, but at night, in the cover of dark, they'd really let it go, and it was black and thick. These women did something interesting to me as a conservationist. They launched this conservation campaign through their church. They went to traditions that they knew: gospel music, God, and passion. And they went up against this refinery in southern Louisiana that did not have monitors on their stacks, and they won. The stack emissions were finally regulated. This idea of putting religion and conservation had never really occurred to me before. I'd been working in conservation for a number of years, and this was a new idea. 6 years after this occurred, I was going down to southern Louisiana again, and priests were handing out at that time food vouchers, and they were overseeing some suicide watches of these fishing families that had been wiped out during the Deepwater Horizon explosion. It really impacted their industry, and these families were desperate. What they did in a time of crisis was that they returned to their traditions, to their faith, and to their religious leaders. Now, conservation cannot be done by radio collaring and by tagging alone. It cannot be done through surveys and data sets. If conservation is going to be successful, there has to be a community that's living in and around the issue wildlife habitat that cares about the wildlife as a sacred value. So it occurred to me that I needed to go to the religious leaders and begin to talk to them. It was when I met the many gods of planet Earth. I went to Mongolia in 2002 as part of a team going over to work on a fisheries conservation project. This was an area on the Siberian border, and it was inhabited by nomadic people who lived on the banks of the Eg-Uur River. The Eg-Uur River was also home to the taimen, which is a fish that gets up to 180 pounds and 6 foot in length, making it a huge draw for anglers who come over to catch and release fly fish. There were a number of pressures being put on this fish at the time, and we were really tempted to launch into a full-on sort of community outreach effort. We had fisheries biologists over there who were tagging the fish and tracking their movements. But the first thing I wanted to do with this team is go and visit families and listen to their stories. What was it about this culture what did they respect? What did they value? I learned a few things. Number one, Mongolians come from a long ago coupling of a wolf and a roe deer. Number two, in this valley, a long time ago, a wicked shaman had really terrorized the people, but later converted to Buddhism, as did the inhabitants of this valley. And number three, the death of one taimen equals the souls of 999 people suffering. So that's what we built the campaign around. It was a circuitous route, actually. We rebuilt a Buddhist monastery that became a site for Buddhism and conservation dialogue. We started a summer camp for kids, a free one, where they would learn about conservation issues, they'd learn about conservation policy, nature, and they also were learning about water quality and fisheries. We went and we were able to we were able to create these festivals that incorporated local traditions and whatnot. And I want to say that right now the taimen population is stable in this area. We started the project in 2004, and that's one of the only places in the world that can make that claim. When I began to look at religions and look at cultures, I discovered that every faith, every culture has a message about ecology and nature and its importance. For example, in the Bhagavad Gita, which is a sacred text in Hinduism, they have a quote that says, "He is dear who practices nonviolence against all living beings." And then, on a more rather condemning note, in Revelation, in the Christian Bible, it says, "God destroyeth he who destroyeth the world." So I thought these were so interesting, and it was really adding another dimension to the work. And it was also this wonderful new experience for me to be working with religious leaders. So I started the organization, the Tributary Fund, and together we go and unearth traditions, or discover, rather, traditions, encourage the traditions that put value in wildlife, and really try to bring these traditions either back or to make them a part of community practice and replicating or whatnot. And I want to give an example of one of the things that we do, which is the next step. We find these traditions. Buddhism is a good example of people who believe that all sentient beings need to be protected. So we brought a group of Buddhist monks over to the United States, and we've done it now for 4 years. And they went and saw a researcher who was working on Pallas cats. Pallas cats are a cat indigenous to Mongolia. And in the work that they were doing, they were tranking the cat, collaring the cat, and they were harvesting eggs. And after the monks saw this, there was a lot of discussion, and obviously it had touched a nerve. And they turned around and said, we do understand that there's harm being made towards these beings. We understand that this cannot be comfortable, the harvesting of eggs in particular. But the scientists said that these eggs are insurance policy, essentially. If this animal faces extinction, we have this genetic material. And they said, we think this research is okay because there is nothing more profane than the idea of extinction. Now, this is something that really drives us. These beliefs, these traditions, we're really finding them more and more in Bhutan, Mongolia. We're working in the United States with a variety of different religions. Science is important for understanding conservation boundaries, but beliefs and storytelling is important for local communities' involvement. Both are essential in protecting the earth. Luckily, we have many gods on our side. Thank you.